We're live. All right, Doc, you good?
We're live? We're live right now? Okay.
Let's say hello. Start.
Hello. I was just saying we got tunes. All right, so good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture. We're in for a treat today, so we're going to go ahead and get it kicked off. I am Dr. Tamara Butler, serve as the executive director of this fine institution, and we want to welcome you to our tea and cake launch event. I also want to add a little context. So it's the opening of a very beautiful exhibit called Aiming for Freedom that is from the mind of the creative and brilliant Dr. K. Melchor Hall. And so I'm just grateful that she was able to come here and hang out with us and think about dreaming with us and making us one of the first stops on a longer journey of this work. And so nobody came here to hear me talk about bios and credentials because this is a very credentialed individual. And so I just want to turn it over to Dr. Hall. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Dr. Butler. Such an honor to be here. I think the camera is here, but so hopefully if you're not here today, at some point you'll have an opportunity to come to Avery to take a look at some of the art that's up. This is an installation that I hope will be a traveling exhibition that will go through July 2026. This is the first stop. We couldn't think of a better place to launch than in Charleston at the Avery Research Center. In each particular installation, there will be 4 core artists who will be traveling and we'll invite local artists to join us in each new location. So this is where we are today. We're not going to start officially right now because we're going to walk a little bit around and have people reflect on the pieces here. We're going to start at 11:30, but I'll share more, and hopefully if you're elsewhere where we're going in the future, you might join us as an artist. So I think that's it for now. We'll have a bit more music until we start at 11:30. Thank you.
17 people on this. When I get back there, I'm gonna change the camera over, then you can go to get started.
Okay.
All right.
And is this my?
Cool.
All right, so I think we're gonna go ahead and start. Again, I am Kay Melker Hall. I'm a New America Us at 250 Lumina Foundation Fellow. So there's a whole cohort of Us at 250 New America Fellows. But the Lumina Foundation is particularly interested in hosting fellowships for people who are engaging institutions of higher education. And so because this exhibition is going to a number of colleges and universities, that's part of the reason why I'm also a Lumina Foundation Fellow. And I also just say that this is an interactive engagement. It's not designed to be, sort of me as an expert and you all sort of listening to things, but it really is an engagement about what we understand in terms of liberation, freedom, and how we can understand what that looks like together. So I'll just put up here sort of the arc of the day, and this will be a bit condensed, but for those of you all are here, hopefully you got an opportunity to look at some of the pieces that are up. There's a whole room. I don't know, at some point, if you're online, I don't know that you can see it, but maybe at some point we can pan up or so that people can see everything that's in the room. If you come here, also remember that there's also a second room, a side room where you can see some pieces there. And so what we started with at the very beginning of our time here was thinking about some questions about freedom. And so I asked people to consider what freedom is for them, for themselves personally, and then what freedom is for us, however you're understanding us or we. And then I asked people to think about which work of art, there are many here, most strongly resonates with their understanding of freedom. And so I'm going to ask some of the people who are in the room to give me a sense of what you're thinking about, what freedom is to you, and which of these pieces of art resonates with you.
The piece that resonated with me first most, I was made aware of that reference by the feeling of like water building up in my body, ready to come down and come out, and instant connection to personal story. And something broader than that. This piece was the piece by Kimberly Love Radcliffe, piece. And this is another piece and it reminded me instantly of the amount of people that I don't know.
You're being handed a mic just so that people online can hear you. Thank you so much. So you have to just push up sorry about that. So I'll just share that, yeah. Go ahead,
Thank
Frank.
you so much. Do I need to repeat myself, you think?
You don't have to. I mean, people can come in the flow whenever they.
All right, that sounds good. I was saying that both of these pieces reminded me so much that there are so many people that I don't know, but have lived in their truth, shared what has come out of them. And has in essence for me saved my life. That's what I think of when I think of Black feminist writers, when I think of Zora Neale Hurston. And that was where that feeling and emotion came up. And so I think when we think of freedom and what freedom is for me in this moment in that way, I thought of the concept of North Star. Freedom is to be guided by something that is immensely loving of you and undoubtedly true in that love. Thank you.
Beautiful. Does maybe one other person want to share their thoughts about what either freedom is to you individually or collectively?
Did you want us to answer the first or like about the work?
You can answer any part of any of these questions.
Okay.
Keeping for yourself what you want and sharing whatever's left over. Yeah.
I feel like I resonated most with the piece by Terry Moses. I believe it's Impossible.
Can you just hold the mic up so people, yeah.
Oh, sorry. But it felt the most tangible to what I consider freedom. Like just the movement, the expression, the fact that it's a piece clearly, you know, of a Black person unclothed, kind of suspended in air with nothing holding it down.
Right.
And to me, like that's the embodiment of freedom. Is choice. It's no fear. It's existing. And that piece jumped out to me. I also really resonated with the Zora Neale Hurston piece, simply because like their eyes are watching God. It's a story about freedom and about that choice. And it's one of those works that I constantly come back to and keep in my personal like canon of Black feminist freedom works. So that it spoke a lot to me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Does anybody else want to share before we, yeah.
Yeah, admittedly, I have not seen all of the works, and there are many that I'm anxious to study and will over the next couple of months make sure
Yeah.
to really try to engage.
And even if you had, I mean, you see it more and your answers can change. So,
Yeah. Would you tell me the name of the artist who did the torso in the corner there?
Beverly Tate Mitchell.
That's okay, Beverly Tate Mitchell. Okay. It catches my eye even from the distance that I'm seeing it, and I haven't even studied it really well, but it just catches my eye because as a senior citizen, I'm becoming more and more aware of issues about body and our bodies as they're perceived as female bodies as they age, you know, our comfort level, whether it's with our breasts, whether it's with our vaginas, whether it's whatever. But the whole idea of Black women with, you know, we know the sordid ideas that have come through the years about our abuse, but when I look at that, I start thinking something more jubilant and proud and free
Right.
about, and it reminds me of how I walk around naked now at home. And I'm sorry if anybody has to imagine what that's like.
Wait, we're not apologizing here. This is a
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
zone. Feel free to share anything you
I'm
want to
kidding,
share.
but I'm saying it just brought all of that to mind.
That's right.
This idea of embracing our female bodies but with a love and an acceptance.
Right.
The breast might not be quite as taut and standing up quite that way anymore, but you know, but as we age, you know, how do we just keep loving them and accepting them and ourselves?
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anybody else before I move to the next? All right. So thank you all for engaging that question. I wanted to say a little bit just about the history of this project. So this project started as something called Aiming for Justice, which was a reparations workshop held at a place called Pendle Hill, which is a Quaker conference center outside of Philadelphia, for US-based white inheritors of wealth to engage in conversations about what justice looks like. And the first year I held it, the group asked me to come back, and I said that I would if they would gather people who would agree to redistribute collectively $10,000, sort of $10,000 of their wealth. And they came back and they did that. And they asked me to have a workshop again. And I don't think of myself as sort of a touring workshop facilitator. So, I said, I'll come back again if you agree to redistribute $20,000. And the timing was such as that was 2021, 40 plus people participated in a virtual workshop, and over $70,000 was redistributed. And I asked at the end, I always, ask people what's their commitment to continuing the work. And they said they wanted to have another workshop. And so I said I would if people were willing to redistribute. You all might guess what comes next, $30,000. And so the following year, a group got together and $60,000 was redistributed. And that year it was to the National Black Food and Justice Alliance's Mutual Aid Fund for Black Farmers. And after that, the interest waned. And so you can think about the timeline, you can look at other funding histories. In fact, you can look online and hear people talking about a real burst of funding that happened after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others that were really sort of front and center in the media. And then people experienced after that a real dip in funding and interest and participation in these kinds of initiatives. I had at that point started to think about what it would mean to work with artists in order to shift away from an exclusively actuarial economic discussion of can we calculate what is owed, into a visioning of what liberation looks like, what shared freedom looks like, which is about more than the absence of harm. I think that you can not be imprisoned and still not be free. And so I thought that it was important to partner with artists to think about what that looks like. And I was fortunate in a number of ways to get support for that. I received a Humanity in Action racial equity grant. I commissioned work from 3 artists, one of whom was named in the conversation. Well, actually, that's interesting. She wasn't one of the initial artists. So the 3 initial artists were Daryl Ann Game McCalla, Destiny Palmer, and Marla McLeod. Those were the 3 people I initially commissioned works from. But then I had to figure out what to do with those works. And fortunately, I got a New America Us at 250 fellowship. And I'll say a little bit more about that later. I just want to also say that Ted Johnson, who oversees that fellowship, wanted to be here today. But as many of you know, there's some weather in New York that has made travel and transportation challenging. So he unfortunately is not able to be here. But so I got that fellowship, which it allowed me to move these pieces around and to actually plan a series of installations, which I'm in the process of doing. I came here to Charleston over the summer, and thank you, Dr. Millicent Brown, for making the introduction to Dr. Butler here at the Avery Research Center. And so this is the first installation, but hopefully not the last, of a series of installations that will, again, include those 3 core artists, but always have local engagement about what freedom, how people are understanding freedom in those places. And so you'll see here that the next stop is going to be a Juneteenth installation at the Noir Collective Art Space and Bookshop in Asheville, North Carolina. And the idea is really to be thinking about how to encourage more discussion about the importance of freedom and being guided by artists to understand freedom. And I just want to say that this isn't just an, an exercise in abstraction, that the work is also very much connected to people who have been impacted by incarceration. And so I'll say a little bit more maybe about that later, but so some of the installations will have a specific focus on daughters of people impacted by incarceration and or work with women who were formerly incarcerated. So there's this lovely exhibit up here. You can't, oh, that's right, you can't see. I just realized you all can't see what I'm posting here. Don't worry about it. It's good. It's a surprise. People online can see. The reason why I look this way is because the next slide is about altar cakes. So I met this lovely individual, Zion Celeste, at something called a Love and Liberation Camp. Shout out to Mumbet's Freedom Farm. I was not, so many good things have come out of that experience. And so one of the things that was important to think about at this launch here at Avery in Charleston was what does it mean like to even have more art and edible art, especially given the trajectory of those reparations workshops ending with farmers. I myself work on a farm. Zion Celeste also, I think, well, works on farms, works with farms, cooks for farmers, all kinds of things. But I am going to let them tell you a little bit more about a beautiful display here, and we'll go from there. You are standing up.
As I made this altar, thank you. As I made this altar with Abigail over here, I started humming and realized that I would really love to invite you all to open the altar with me through harmonizing together, you know, bringing our nervous systems into the space even more. And it's an invitation. So, you know, go at your pace, your sound. I would love to give a cue. And oh, hi y'all. You can also join in too, please. I'm new to this. Yes, so the practice of this humming practice together will look like me giving you a cue, you humming together, you even changing the cue if you like, and then me singing, and then us coming out of the humming naturally. How does that sound? All right, okay. Yeah, that's all, that's it. That's it. Yeah, you can even keep it in your throat. It's also for you, you know? All right, so let's see. This is what I would like to invite you to hum. Can I hear that? Oh, yes. Ide were were ide so. Ide were were. Ide were were ide so. Ide were were idaya. Ochakini wa ide so. Cheke cheke chekinita. Ide were were. Ide were were ide so. Ide were were. Ide were were ide so. Ide were were idaya. Ochakini wa ide so. Cheke cheke chekinita. Ide were ide were ide so. Ide were ide were ide so. Ide were idaya. Ochakini wa ide so. Cheki nita. Ide were. Remember to breathe, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me in that. I'd love to share a little bit about myself now. My name is Zion Celeste. You can lovingly refer to me as they, them, we, us, beloved sister. Sister's my favorite. I am from Louisiana, born and raised. I am the great-granddaughter of Celeste Rideau and the granddaughter of Idea Hicks, both bakers in their own right. I am presently, I almost used the word displaced. I'm not displaced. But I feel far away. I am presently in upstate New York. And for the past 8 years, I have been in loving kinship with the land and community there. And maybe is even my first secure relationship with the concept of community. I am a land tender, an abolitionist farmer, a somatic abolitionist, a baker and chef for farmers, for change makers, for activists, for people that I see as beloved and blessed, and ancestors, like present ancestors in the making. I essentially make spirit food. It's a practice. I'm a beloved believer of practice. I'm a believer in the mundane as ritual and how it can bring us into this experience of freedom, of being connected at every level. This piece here, this altar that I have set up today is under a series or a phrase that I've been working with for the past couple of years. The phrase is, remember, beloved, we all have a seat at the table, like ... I think everyone fills in how they belong at the table and what it means to live in our purpose and what it means to be in a body that actually is able to hear and be guided and step up to that purpose. That's the essence of this art for me, the essence of what I enjoy exploring in the realms of aiming for freedom, aiming for body freedom. I definitely resonated when Melchor shared that you can be out of prison and still be fully incarcerated. It's true. We feel it in our bodies all the time. What does it mean to be present to that, to gather around that and make spaciousness within ourselves? I believe food and land are some of our biggest allies and connectors. You know, they're our companions, our protectors, and they even look to us to be that for them as well. What more can I say? That's what I have to say. Thank y'all for listening. I'm trying to see if there's any elements. There's so many elements inside of these things that I create. They're often a mixture of what is shared with me when folks tell me like they're not just their vision, but what lives at their belly, what lives in their gut, the story of it, the connection to it. So there's so many things that I piece together. I don't know if I can go through all of them, but for one of these is the king cake here. Being from Louisiana, I decided to make a queen cake. And I want to actually share, the last thing I'll share is my experience of making this queen cake, which was one of my first times doing doughs. You know, have your art tell you about yourself. I really knew I wanted to do doughs for this after Melchor called me. I knew it, that was the internal feeling. And then there was fear. There was fear. There was this, since I love somatics, there was this feeling of being disconnected, avoidance, of wanting to be in the kitchen, a feeling of like, I can't be there, I can't do this. And that is actually a feeling that I often experience in the kitchen. It's also a place where I transform that, but that is a part of the process as I am in presently. And it reminds me of this book that I'm reading right now, The Cooking Gene by Michael Twitty, who is a gay, Black, Jewish artist, cultural historian. I could go on. There's a list. Oh, take me there, take me there. And there's two quotes that have been living in my life recently. The one quote is, African Americans have one of the hardest tasks in history to piece together fragments and create a story for themselves. My favorite part of this quote, he says that this is not a harrowing task at all. It's like the Japanese art of taking china that was broken and piecing it back together with gold. I can't remember the name right now, but that's the first quote. And the second quote is later in this book where he talks about the kitchen being a place where enslaved women were often subjected to great harm. Reading that made me understand why the kitchen is this subversive place for me, why it lives in two different spaces of tension and joy, and even my interest in moving through that tension to get to joy. So that's what I brought here for you today. That's some of the story. That's how food and working with food changes me, not just on a surface level, but internally. And for me, I believe that changes my entire history, my entire whatever comes, whatever I meet. Thank you. I got so into talking, but the last thing that I wanted to do was actually serve a piece to the ancestors. And I want to name here, the ancestral practice looks to have so many forms and ways. Let's remember that ancestors for us go beyond human. They might even go into space, what have you. So as part of this, the first piece of cake, either for me, always goes to a kid, our child, or an ancestor. So I'll do that, and I'm going to be serving y'all cake. So please come up and receive. Thank you. What's that?
So I'll just talk a little bit while Zion Celeste is cutting the queen cake. So the practice is always putting out a piece for those ancestors who are not here at this moment physically embodied. But then also and this is one of the benefits of coming in person, if you are in the room, you also will have an opportunity to taste these cakes. And I'm gonna go ahead, and I don't know whether or not you all can still see this if you're online, but I will just say that we have a couple of discussion questions connected to the question of land and food traditions. And so if you're here in person, you have a sheet where the discussion questions are on the back, you can jot them down, but we'll spend a little bit of time with people talking about those questions with someone near them while also enjoying a little bit of cake. So the questions are, in what ways is land connected to land and food traditions? People have a lot of different thoughts about that. And in what ways is freedom work also spiritual work? And so while the cake is being cut and shared, I will share just a little bit more about part of my answer to that. And I hope that people, if you're online, and I don't know, I'm not sure if you can see me or if you can see sign, but it doesn't really matter. I'll just say, I'm going to say a little bit more about sort of how I see these things, how questions of ancestry and ancestors and recent ancestors has impacted my work with this project. So in the midst of doing this project, quite recently, or sort of as I was putting together sort of where this was going to go, or right afterwards, two people who are really important to me passed away. The first one is Roland Freeman, who's a pretty well-known, world-renowned photo documentarian of African diasporic culture. And part of what his passing did was that it brought quilters into my life in a closer way than was previously. He's done documentation of photographing and documentation of African American quilters. And so one of the things that happened was that the three artists who I initially named, I decided needed to be joined by a fourth artist, Kimberly Love Radcliffe, who has a number of pieces in this exhibition that honor Black women, artists, creatives. There's a piece about Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. I'm looking at the color purple piece in here. There are, in the other room, a number of pieces. And so it shifted how I was thinking about the project, how I was connected to quilting and quilters as an important African American folk tradition and art. And then the other person, the next month in September, my grandmother, Mrs. Beulah Quick, passed away at the age of 102. And so she is, and Zion, this photograph was taken by Zion Celeste. Zion Celeste was the last person to photograph us together before we knew that that would be the case. There was no reason for her to be out there with her camera because they were not out there as a photographer, but instead were there catering. And so it happened that I realized sometime later that Zion was the last person to photograph us. And so asked for the photograph, and then we ended up talking about my grandmother. And so then it just made me feel like, well, we have to, everywhere it goes, there has to be some connection to this connection that we had on the farm with my grandmother. And also the last place where I was with my grandmother was in Charleston. So that trip when I came in the summer, and I hadn't spent any time in Charleston before really, but I came here with my grandmother, and I just have to say, Cheryl Jefferson Page is here, our colleague and co-worker, co-conspirator, Abigail Cumberbatch is here. My cousin. But anyway, so it has been really great to sort of be accompanied by all of these folks. And so my grandmother went from here to spending the last 2 months of her life in her home in North Carolina. And so just thinking about ancestral influence, freedom, art, farm connection, again, you can tell here that we are sort of in a farm environment. I'm just really honored, and I know well, I don't know if I've thanked them today. So I want to say thank you, Zion Celeste, for sort of, being a part of this and helping to move this forward. So I think we'll give it a couple of minutes. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else about the piece, the cake for the ancestors, or if oh, the mic. You have the mic?
Someone will give me someone will give me a lesson eventually. Uh, well, yeah, I'll share that. I'll share about the cakes for your dietary needs and restrictions. Um, we have a fully gluten cake. It has the whole nines, dairy, the whole cow, all the wheat. So either dig in or stay back. And this cake, it has bourbon infused dates, walnuts, brown butter, and cinnamon folded into the layers. It's rich and decadent.
Their gurneys out front.
Little slices, little slices. And this is a gluten-free cake. But it does have eggs, and the icing is also dairy-free. So it's a citrus almond flour cake. A little dense, but a little light at the same time. And I guess an encouragement could be, as you mentioned, Mrs. Quick, thank you so much for bringing her in. She's in my heart too. Continue to think about as you eat this or partake in it in whatever way that you do. Maybe envision and imagine yourself with the person or ancestor that you would share this with. Maybe have a conversation, maybe just be silent together.
So maybe we'll play music for just a little bit while people eat, and hopefully you can discuss the questions. If you're online, you can discuss them with, you can think about them yourself, or you can discuss them with someone near you. And then we'll come back in just a minute to share some of our thoughts about those questions. Thanks so much for joining us. Yeah. I'm gonna mention that. I just been reminding myself, like, what was I supposed to do?
Next week, they'll ask people to pitch on like the artwork or, doing works like this. They can hop on.
Okay. All right, so I'll just say next month there'll be digital. Nice.
Full digital exhibition will be held. On the edited version.
Will be up next week. Nice, thank you. What, your daughter? Your daughter's enjoying herself? Get off that. Keep them out. I said all of them were untitled?
No, I got three.
She hasn't given me any new names. Yeah, so. The hanging pieces, yeah, I think those are new. I think those are also untitled. And so, I think, oh, this mine is fast. It's, no, this one is right. It's 18 after, not 20 after, but I don't know why anyway. Um, well, I'm gonna go back up to, in case people have, so that they can share their responses to these. These conversations could last all day. And So beautiful to have these rich discussions, these discussion questions. So I wanted to hear from people about these questions. I shared a little bit already about thinking about my connections to land and food traditions, working on a farm, meeting Zion Celeste through this farm experience, Love and Liberation Camp, Mom Bet's Freedom Farm, small plug. But I would love to hear from other people about how you think about freedom as connected to land. And also, I'm curious if people have some particular stories around Charleston. I mean, I'm continuing work around reparations. And so when I leave here, I'm going to Asheville to meet with a group of Quakers, Asheville Friends meeting. But part of what I've been reading and thinking about my work both there and here is around the promise of abolition in prison. I'm sorry, promise of abolition. This is a book called Repair. And part of it has some of the history around the Sea Islands here, and specifically, you know, the promises that were not made good upon in relation to this area. So I'd love to hear what people are thinking about. What do you think about when you think about land, freedom, food? I know you will. Go ahead. Historian, Dr. Millicent Brown.
Well, it's not a happy topic for me, and I am a native Charlestonian. But there's a wise man, community activist by the name of Bill Saunders, who has left quite an imprint in this community over the many years as a labor activist and many other things. And Bill Saunders said to me many, many years ago that at least in the 20th and now 21st century, Black folks don't own no land. We just habitate it until other folks decide they want it. And he was reflecting on what has happened, especially here in the Charleston area, where areas where Blacks were not allowed, all of a sudden, then as people left those areas, then we started buying those areas. And then whether it's because of the weather or the flooding, then when people decide they don't want to be there, then Black folks move there. And we have been in a constant shifting all around as other groups decide that we want to be there. And as someone who grew up here in Charleston on the peninsula, and I'm a victim, my family is a victim of having been upseated and removed from the peninsula because of a major thoroughfare. And so land, as we know, is so important for rooting people. We are a prime example of just having been shifted. And the appeal is, especially to younger ones, to please remember to value the land and the spaces they occupy. And don't get, to the extent that they can help, don't get caught up in just being there until somebody else wants it.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they want to share? I'll just say that, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I think I would also echo a lot of those sentiments. I'm also a Charleston native, been here for 33 years. And I think for me, freedom when it comes to Blackness, it exists in being able to go somewhere and be yourself and be around people who look like you. And in Charleston, a lot of those spaces are disappearing and disappearing fast. And so it's awkward to go to be on a street that you know very well and see no one who looks like you. And it's a very awkward thing, and it feels weird, and it's like culturally it's just off, you know? And so sorry, it's it's
Take
one of
your
those
time.
things that's like, you know, I find myself missing the Charleston that I grew up in, because it's like they kind of just tear it apart and they don't think about, you know, what it's doing to us, you know, and you know how we feel about it. So I guess for me, I see the importance of finding those areas where we can continue to congregate and be together and, you know, be ourselves, because like I said, as we see, those places are disappearing fast. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm just gonna read like a couple of passages from this book. I'll just say that it's called, again, Repair, and the subtitle is Redeeming the Promise of Abolition by Catherine Frank. And the book focuses, it has two case studies, and one of them is the Seallans, in part because right after emancipation, it was a sort of experiment in redistribution, in giving land back that got undone. And so it's a really powerful place to think about the question of reparations and what is repair and what should it look like. I'm just going to read a little bit here. The initial intent after emancipation was to redistribute land to formerly enslaved people. In fact, the distribution of land to newly freed people was undertaken in the Sea Islands and at Davis Bend, that's the other case study, as an explicit form of reparation. But the land was redistributed back to former slave owners when the Johnson administration assumed control of post-Civil War operations after the murder of Abraham Lincoln. Both of these early and unrealized experiments in land-based reparation exemplify what it would have meant to take repair seriously. Yet in the end, Johnsonian politicians structured Black freedom around contract labor and other legally mediated relationships with white people. And so just to think about that, you know, even when you go right back to sort of, you know, periods of emancipation, that it was clear that people knew that there should be some sort of structural shift, and that there's great detail in the chapter that is that case study about how unjust the structure of the auctions were, how, you know, it was set up to block out groups of Black families that had gotten together to purchase land. But then there were two other things that I noticed just to be thinking about, because one of the things that this exhibit is designed to do is to get people to think about gender and race alongside one another in the context of this kind of history of racial harm. Is this excerpt that says, one thing worth noting about the land claims made by the freed people of the Sea Islands to the tax commissioners, such as the people formerly enslaved on the Pleasant Point plantation, is that many women filed those claims and deeds were issued in their names. This came at a time when white women could not legally own property in the state of South Carolina. And so I just think about, you know, what happens when there's that kind of accumulation or potential for accumulation of land or assets among Black women, and sort of how people respond to that, the aggression towards that possibility. And then I'll just read one other piece that points to that sort of gender component. When a federal agent returned to the Sea Cloud plantation on Edisto Island just after Johnson vetoed the Freedmen's Bill, he was hoping to pave the return of its former white owner. Instead, he, and this is a quote, was beset by the Black women on this place in a in a very serious manner and was obligated to use decisive measures for the preservation of the property as well as for my own head. This is a quote again. They said they would not make any arrangement whatever for me or anybody else, that they cared for no United States officer. The government brought them to the island and this is in quotes, they would burn down the house before they would move a rag, or another quote, from it themselves until put out. And so just to be thinking about sort of gender, aspects of sort of what it means to have even the promise, the potential of some sort of land reparation. So thank you so much for sharing some of those stories. But I just want to say that I'm continuing to engage reparations movements within the US, not just at the federal level, which is where a lot of attention is, but really looking at the very local levels of efforts among groups who are trying to advance municipal reparations and suggesting that it can happen at all of those levels, that it doesn't have to be an either or discussion, but that the repair that needs to be done can be done at all the levels with all the nuance that the harm was done. Okay. And so I'll just say one last thing about the, I keep on forgetting that you all can't see what I'm looking at here, but this Aiming for Freedom traveling exhibition is a part of a New America Us at 250 initiative. And I'm just going to read 2 quotes from the New America website. On July 4, 2026, the nation will mark the 250th anniversary of the ratification of the Declaration of Independence. The commemoration of our nation's founding should celebrate its progress, spotlight the areas that hinder us from becoming a more perfect union, and spark conversations about the future of America. New America's Us at 250 initiative seeks to accomplish this by advocating for a reimagination of the American narrative based on 3 core concepts: pride in the nation's progress from its origins, reckoning with historical and contemporary wrongs that have caused the nation to fall short of its ideals, and aspiration for a multiracial and inclusive democracy governed by the principles of equality, fairness, and opportunity. And so this particular exhibition is designed to hit on 2 of those 3. So explicitly engaging questions of reckoning locally, the state level, federally, and everything in between. Insurance companies, banks, I think, there's room for a conversation about sort of what does repair look like at the level of those, institution level, because they were really quite important, mortgage company, all of that. And also aspiration, because as we look forward to some future that is more just, more equitable, more free, I think that we have to not just be guided by the very detailed work of, again, economists, actuarial scientists, those are the folks who work with insurance companies to figure out, how long people are going to live and all kinds of things. We don't just need those kind of calculations, but we also, alongside them, need visionaries, need people who have trained themselves in the art of being creative, of imagining worlds that do not yet exist. And so that's, for me, why it was important to have this kind of partnership with artists. And again, New America, Us at 250, Ted Johnson intended to come from New York, but again, wasn't able to come. But at this point, I was going to have him say something about the initiative, but it's a wonderful cohort of people. And I look forward, feel free, you can follow their work to see on the website and on their social media to see other projects. It's a really great group of folks doing interesting things. And that's most of what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to also, though, have a conversation. I wanted to, well, first of all, thank some people. Avery Research Center, Dr. Butler, Darren Calhoun, Brittany Washington isn't here. But thank folks for coming out, for participating in this, to having the conversations, but also wanted to engage in some questions, answers, reckonings, aspirations, comments. Sort of any questions or ideas, thoughts that you all have about the projects or how I came to this. I'm happy to have us have a more interactive discussion about that. So I'll just repeat, you're asking how I came to this, what was calling led me to this work. So it's interesting. I'll say that there are two, I'll mention a couple of things. I'll say I could have entered the work in a number of different ways, but I studied math as an undergraduate student, and I've studied international relations as a doctoral student, and I mention those because that's how I can understand and think about the calculation of what life is worth, and also how I understand diasporic movements of Black people advocating for something different than what currently exists. But the thing that actually I feel like was the impulse to become more engaged had to do with me thinking through the care of my grandmother. So as my grandmother aged, she had Alzheimer's, and we were thinking about what that would mean for us. And so what happens in this place that neither has the infrastructure of most so-called developed countries in terms of caring for its citizens, neither has the more collectivist cultural elements that involves people living together in intergenerational homes, mostly, by choice. And so like the combination of not having that government infrastructure or the culture that promotes more of that kind of living can devastate families. I mean, if, many of us can talk about what 5 or 10 or 20 people in our family had to do in order to take care of one person in this context. And I started to think about what might be owed to my grandmother. I mean, born in 1921, shouldn't there be some age that after which, if you made it to 100, that you should just be able to walk around with a card and get everything free? It's just, and I say that reflecting now on the bill that we got from the hospital in Charleston. And so it is what fuels my rage. And I think that rage is the only appropriate word for it, because anger feels more reactionary, more temporary, like something that can be resolved in a conversation. Like, you bumped into me and I'm angry about it. But the way I talk about it, I say anger is the rage, as soup is the stew. That rage is the kind of thing that only develops over generations. It's not something that someone can resolve with just me, that it's the kind of thing where I have to think about what this woman lived through, and even the gift of the Alzheimer's and her being able to forget enough of it to have some peace in these last years. And so I was just, and so I'm writing right now a non-academic book, a sort of popular audience book about that journey that focuses on white progressives that have good rhetoric and action that mirrors everything that everybody else is doing. That it doesn't actually result in my grandmother getting more support. That, I talk about Quakers and their good intentions. A lot of people talk about their abolitionist histories. In Repair and other texts, you can also read about histories of slaveholding. You can also If you know anybody who studies carceral systems or the history of incarceration and solitary confinement in particular, you know that Eastern Penitentiary and the work of the Quakers was really responsible for developing what has evolved into the contemporary system of solitary confinement. I think the Quakers should come together and as a group end it as an institution, should make sure that it is eliminated in this country as something that even exists. I mean, you know, they can do that on their way to also eliminating prisons, generally speaking, as far as I'm concerned. But the point is that, you know, I just, my mind was spinning like, you know, what am I getting to? Like, if I make it to 100, like, is this what I have to look forward to? That like still people want more, want to extract more? I mean, to me, it is the violence of capitalism. That even while the body is decaying, is losing everything that it once had. I mean, in my grandma's case, literally getting smaller, sort of curving over and coming into itself, that still people would send her a bill. I mean, I just, you know, I don't, you know, like I feel like it's my grandmother. I feel like it was something about her, trying to figure out her care, talking to continuing care homes. I think they should call them something else, just like I think we should call the health system the, you know, pharmaceutical system. I think we should call like these continuing care systems something else. But talking to a place in North Carolina who wants to charge her to be the only Black resident. And I'm like, this looks good for your pamphlet, but let's talk about who these peers are. Her peers in Fayetteville, North Carolina, who are 90s. What were they doing? What's their history? There's not anybody here who hasn't been to a lynching. And you want me to leave her here and pay you to leave her here? I'd be happy to not charge you for the experience of looking a little bit less racist if you'd be willing to not charge us. You know what I mean? So I share that conversation in there, and people think it's better when they go up north, but that is an illusion. I mean, New England in particular is the intellectual power of white supremacist policy. So it's about, you know, people sort of intellectualizing things that people don't even bother to intellectualize in this. I mean, it just doesn't even make sense. But when you want to build policy and a robust structure around it, you got to go to Harvard to talk about like why it should be that way, right? And so we went to a continuing care place in Massachusetts. And there, I asked if I could, at that point, live with my grandmother because she was having severe enough memory problems that she didn't recognize most people. So, you know, you can imagine the sort of fear that might create. I offered, with my 4 degrees in math, computer science, international communications, and international relations, to work for them in whatever capacity they needed indefinitely for the care of my grandmother. They told me that I was too young to live there. I was willing to give away all future earning potential for a safe place for my grandmother, but it's not about the money. It never is. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's about the sort of perpetuation of this system that says that Black folks are less human. And so it's been sort of in watching that, and I could name the sort of care work I've done with other people. I mean, honestly, this is a, you know, sort of never ending thing. And I mean, again, I'm sure I could ask you and you could name somebody, right? So the point isn't the particular example. The point is that something about it warmed the rage in my belly. and just made it clear to me that I needed to be engaging more actively about one, letting white progressives know in no uncertain terms that like, unless you're ending inheritance. So not, and I've said that before and people are like, oh, you mean like we put a tax on it? No. I'm saying end inheritance, write your heirs now and tell them that you've decided that because you understand from everything that you've read or you've heard about that inheritance is the single most powerful way that racists, so that the racist ownership of Black people is being perpetuated into this century, you've decided that you don't want to participate. And also redistribution, like so talking to white progressives and saying like, if you don't participate in those things, like, I know you're just talking to make yourself feel better. So let's not play this game. Let's just, be honest about that. And so I think that it's, that, and then also recently I said I would say a little bit more about this at this point, but I've started working, I'm in a 2-year fellowship at Wellesley College with something called an anti-carceral collaboratory. Working with Roxbury, Massachusetts-based organizations that are interested in ending prisons. And so thinking more through that, supporting that work. But yeah, so I think that, but really, I think it started with my grandmother and thinking about that it never ends. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. I don't claim that I haven't lost my mind. So, so that's the first thing. But the question was, how do you navigate all of this, like the asking for money from these organizations and stuff like that, and without losing your mind? And I don't claim that I haven't lost my mind, but I think that for me, it's the community is richer in this space. Like since I have so fully committed myself to this kind of work, I have been surrounded with a different level of communion, kinship, partnership. I mean, it is, it's because the other kinds of support are relatively flimsy. I mean, I don't know if you ever, changed something about yourself and lost a bunch of friends and you're like, wait a minute, were we friends because of my hairstyle? Or, what I mean? Like, what happened here? You know what I'm saying? But I think that in a way, like the stuff that's been shed when I made clear my commitments, a lot of the fluff, the stuff I didn't need anyway is gone. And so it like clears room for me to focus on our survival. And that might seem, for some people, it feels, it's like, that's not enough, like, I'm like, that's huge. And I'm game for that, and everybody, like people have different things that they're born into. But in my reflections on the work of, and I'll say something about my godfather here, the particular circumstances into which I was born, I'm just clear that like my work is freedom work. So when my godfather passed, and I may cry, so you just have to wait if I cry, but it was Roland Freeman. Oh, I'm sorry, because it's here on the slides, but I have to keep remembering you can't see that. It was devastating. He died at 87, but he was a young 87. You know, he was somebody sort of in the middle of projects. And so I've committed myself to finishing his final project with his widow, Marcia Freeman, and longtime research assistant, Joanne. And part of, well, the last exhibit, it was a quilt project about Black freedom fighters throughout the Western Hemisphere. And I thought, well, that's you know, like, it's just an interesting thing to even think, you know, to think about, like, you know, why was he doing that? Why was that the last project? Why did it end this way? And at first I had some confusion, but then I had some insights, because this is a project that centers Black feminist visions. And there are men who are feminists, and there are queer folks who are feminists, and non-binary folks who are feminists, but it can be very hard to be an embodied cisgender man, sort of, you know, articulating feminism. People will question you because of the embodiment. And I actually think that there are ways in which the project will be better received because I am ushering it through. And now it's tricky to think about, like, what does it mean that it was hard for this Black man raised by his grandmother to talk about Black freedom fighters and be heard, right? But I just think, you know, like, it had to pass to me and this group of other folks who are going to usher it through, again, on the edge of this project, right? So I'm working hard to sort of listen to, you know, sort of what is coming from me, and to do that work. But I think that it can drive us crazy. One, you know, we can make choices, and sometimes those choices are tapping out, laying down, taking a nap. Shout out to nap ministry folks, Trisha Hershey. But you know what I'm saying? So, like, and also we can take time to get really clear on what our part is. So I'm really clear now that an important part of my work is talking about land. And I'm one of those young people, Dr. Brown, who struggles with questions of land ownership. I don't want to own land in that way. Like, so that's tricky, because sometimes we have to stand in the space just so that somebody else doesn't take it away. I mean, it's, you know, there's some politics, there's some strategy there, but I think that it's a difficult thing to navigate. But I think doing it together and knowing that our survival is on the line, you know, motivates a different level of kinship. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions? I'm so sorry that if you're online that we can't. I thought we were going to be able to talk, people. So I've put in this presentation that I think you can see my email if you want to join the mailing list for the traveling exhibition, so that you can find out where we're going to be next. Oh, and Darren left me this note, because I'm supposed to say that the exhibit will be on Avery's digital platform next month, and the edited version of this video will be available next week. So hopefully you'll be able to take a look. I encourage you to also try to come here and see this exhibition before it comes down at the end of April. I also want to mention that the closing event will be the one event for Dr. Millicent Brown's forthcoming book, Another Sojourner for Truth, right? And so, again, you heard her speak earlier, one longtime Charlestonian, one of the, at that time, kids who desegregated the schools here. So hopefully you'll make your way here for for some event at Avery if you haven't already. And so if you're online, thank you. It's been great. If you're here, I'm gonna stay around and eat some cake so we can continue to have a bit of a conversation. But I think with that, we'll close. All right. All right, thank you.